name is Kelly, and today we're doing our February garden tour of my two 3-tier hydroponic systems and the personal garden over in the kitchen. So in this garden behind me, you can kind of get a little bit of a sneak peek. I'm mostly growing cherry tomatoes on this middle level. Out of view below are some dwarf determinant slicer tomatoes, and I also have a Dora tomato down there as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's kind of like a cherry tomato, but a little bigger. And then I have a jalapeno getting started. Up on the top, I have some cucumbers. Well, it's just one cucumber plant, but you'll see in a minute, it's taken over the entire level. I also have one cherry tomato up there and one lavender plant, which is kind of getting hidden, but that's okay. I don't mind if it takes a little longer to grow. In the sprout garden, which I'll show you in a minute, we have green beans up top, one lonely little spinach, which I'll talk about, a cilantro, which is finally picking up speed, and we'll talk about this garden a little more later. I just harvested all my lettuces. I'll put a picture up on the screen of what it looked like because it was amazing, but they had to get harvested. They were at about day 40, so they were ready to go. I do have 2 little babies started, and I do have another video I'll show you guys of those lettuces. They were great. Down below on the bottom, I have 4 cauliflowers. They're baby cauliflowers, so they're obviously designed to stay small. One of them has a head already, which I'm very surprised by, and I'll show you guys a little trick I'm doing with the cauliflower head. It's a trick that a lot of outdoor gardeners will use to prevent the head from spreading open, so we'll talk about that in a minute. And then I have a chive down there too, or a green onion. I know they're different, but I always do that because they look like chives right now, but it's a green onion. And in the personal garden, we have 2 basil plants and a thyme. And again, I'll show you guys those as well. Okay, so again, if you're new here, how I do the garden tours is I usually have a little bit of an introduction like I am right now, and then I will go through and show you guys all the plants. I do have to turn the camera around, but this time I might try and keep it so I'm in the frame a little bit, but I know that's a little tricky just because I'm using a cell phone, so just bear with me a little bit on that one. So why don't we start with the blossom garden first. I'll show you guys the plants, some of the things I'm noticing here, and maybe just a couple other little tidbits about them. And if you have any questions ever about the gardens, please let me know in the comments. Like if you have any questions about the plants I'm growing, maybe if you see something in the gardens that I didn't talk about and you're curious, just let me know. I'd love to answer them. All right, so let's get started. Alrighty, so I thought I'd show you guys a quick look at the gardens before we go into some of the specifics about the plants. So this is my 3-tier garden that has mostly tomatoes in it, cucumber and tomato on the top, and a lavender hidden way over there in the corner. And then I have my cherry tomatoes. There's actually 4 crammed in there. And then we'll talk about why I over germinated. And then down here I have some slightly larger, those are those determinate tomatoes I was telling you about. And then the Dora in the back with a small jalapeno in the corner. Okay, and then moving over, I have a composter, which maybe we'll talk about at some point. I have not started it yet. This is the sprout garden. Okay, so we have our beans, Scott bush beans in the top right corner, and we'll go over that in a second, but that is mostly just one bush bean, which is crazy. Baby spinach, we got a cilantro, a couple lettuces, not much in the nursery. I need to add some more stuff to that. And then my cauliflowers on the bottom with some of my green onions in the back. All right, so let's go look at that personal garden. Okay, so here's the Rise personal garden. I mostly use it just to grow herbs. I was hoping to put my cilantro in here, but I was having some cilantro issues. So right now it's just the 2 basil and then my thyme. And this basil is doing great. I mean, here, just get a look at the size of these leaves. Basil does really well in hydroponics, and this one, I think it's a couple weeks, it's about 3 to 4 weeks old now, so it's got quite a bit of time left on it. I've already harvested a little bit off of it. And then you might notice I have some foil covering the corners. That's to keep light out because unfortunately this garden, you see the gap right there? I love the design, but it does have some gaps in it. So I have to make sure to keep those covered. All right, so we're not going to talk anymore about this garden here. Just wanted to show you guys the basil. Thyme's kind of a slow grower, but it's coming along, so I'm excited that that's actually coming, actually coming along and working. I used to get a lot of root rot with thyme, but so far I've had some success. All right, so let's go back to the other 2 gardens. All right, everybody, welcome to the cucumber jungle. So this is a mini me cucumber from Park Seed. This is one plant. So I actually used to grow my cucumbers down there on the bottom shelf and then have them climb up the trellis. And now I just grow on the top shelf. So this is where the plant stem is. And I have 3 coming out of this one stem. So it'll keep growing more, but I actually will trim them down. If we can find one, I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. I actually think, nope, I don't see one. But an offshoot, kind of like this, is what I'm talking about. So I would trim these off until there were only 3 total on the plant. Okay, so this one is like wrapping around. It's like wrapping all the way around and going up through the trellis and up through the top. So you can see these cucumbers, they are very prolific. I have another vine right here. This one is wrapping around the back of the garden, and I think it's the one that's coming up here, and then I have another one obviously in the back. So the reason I cut these down so that there's only 3 offshoots is just because the plant will put a lot of energy into producing these offshoots and not so much energy into fruiting, which is what I eventually want it to do. And it is starting to do that, and you'll see that right here. Here's one of our first big cucumbers. I mean, it's a mini cucumber, but this is about the size they'll get. That one's actually almost ready for harvesting, which is great because I'm having salads next week, some of my lettuce. I have another one here, and then you can even see there is a 3rd one growing next to it. So these guys are getting close to the size we want. Maybe a little bit bigger than that. I usually will wait for this flower to pop off. If you start seeing them getting like this light green, almost white, that's probably past ripe. So I actually might need to pull that guy soon. Okay, and the other thing I wanted to point out about the cucumber, because this is a question a lot of people ask. They'll post pictures of their cucumbers looking like this, and a lot of people get worried that this is a problem. Like, oh no, my plant is, you know, it's turning brown, it's brittle, it's got these spots on it. This is actually completely normal, especially for a mature plant. I'll even come through here and I will just pull these off eventually. Like this one here is starting to get kind of bad, but like I'll just come through. I just take them right off with my hand and I'll get rid of those. So eventually the plant will start to drop these leaves because it's focusing all of its energy into fruit production. So just wanted to point that out because this is pretty normal with cucumbers, but look at the size of this leaf. I mean, this garden has really taken off since I've made those changes to the nutrients, which I spoke about in a different video, which I think was in the What's Wrong with My Gardens video and also my previous plant tours. So if you're interested in learning, if you have an issue with your garden, you want to figure it out, that video might help. Anyway, so that's my cucumber. And the other thing I wanted to mention about this cucumber plant is the difference between male and female. Actually, this plant only grows female flowers. And you can tell because the actual baby fruit is behind the flower. So the male version would just be the actual flower pretty much. And the flower would look slightly different. So what's nice about this cucumber is it's parthenocarpic, which means it doesn't need to be pollinated. So it pollinates itself. Another thing I'll point out is the plant will naturally drop cucumbers as it's going. So like this is completely normal. So you're gonna see these blackened pieces. Totally fine. I just leave them. I mean, if you really wanted to pluck them off, you could. But for the most part, that's natural for the plant to do that. Don't worry if it does. You can even like trim off some of these if you want it to focus on production of fruits, but it'll drop them on its own. Okay, so in this mass, I actually have a cherry tomato up here. This is a mini Siam, and it's pretty crowded. So with these cherry tomatoes, I'll talk about why I have so many in a minute, but you can actually just give the plant a good shake. You can use a toothbrush, which actually, or not a toothbrush, a paintbrush, although a toothbrush would probably work too. You can use a paintbrush and just gently paint the flowers, essentially. And what you're doing when you do that is you are dropping the pollen, which is collecting in here, and it'll fall into the tip of the flower, where the female parts are. Okay, so these are actually, most tomatoes, at least these ones, have the male and female parts in the flower, and all it usually takes is a little bit of a shake, a light breeze. You could use a fan or that paintbrush I told you guys about. But yeah, look at all the flowers on this thing. It's doing very well up here, especially competing with this cucumber. So I'm very pleased with that. I already have some baby tomatoes going on. And then over here in the corner is my lavender, which is actually doing okay for being kind of crammed in this corner. But yeah, so there's my lavender. And it still smells really good. It's going to take a while to flower, especially if it's competing with all these things, but I'm happy with it sitting there. Okay, so let's look at our next shelf. Okay, so let's start over here. So this cherry tomato has actually been in here forever. This is one of the first cherry tomatoes I had when I had my garden problems that I do talk about in a different video. But just, you know, this one is, I believe this was one of my red robins. And then I have, I believe all 4 of these are red robins, but there might be a mini Siam in here somewhere. I think this is a mini Siam and the other 3 are red robins. So the reason that there's so many tomatoes in here, this one actually has a lot of tomatoes on it too. They're kind of hidden under the leaves. This one was also one of my tomatoes that was in the garden when I was having all those nutrient problems. So a lot of it was very heavy on the leaf growing, but it's gotten much better. Okay, so the reason I have so many cherry tomatoes is I was having a lot of nutrient issues with my garden before I started adding things like this flower power fuel, which I do talk about in a different video. I was lacking on calcium, magnesium. I did have CalMag and I have been adding that, but adding this has made a huge difference. So this is a phosphorus and potassium booster, specifically, excuse me, for flowering plants. So after I started adding that, I really was having a lot more success. But before that, I was having some major problems. Like if you go back and check out my December garden tour video, the plants looked so sad. And so I started adding this, and then these 2 cherry tomatoes, this one here with the actual tomatoes on it, and this one in the middle, really came back to life. But I had actually germinated and started growing more tomatoes because I was like, oh, I want to have a backup plan in case these guys don't make it. And they made it, which is great. And I'm getting a lot of tomatoes off of these. I'm actually going to try one for you guys. I have been eating them for my other plant. I mean, they're still really good. The skin's a little thicker on that. I think it's just because they've been sitting there forever. But they still have a really good flavor. A lot of people will say things like, and it might be the case for them, that cherry tomatoes or tomatoes in general grown in hydroponics just don't have that same flavor as they do outside. And I think it really comes down to, obviously, you need to have the right amount of light in there. You need to have the right variety. All the varieties are going to taste different, but it really comes down to nutrients. So I've heard that having just that extra CalMag in there, calcium and magnesium supplement, which I have shown in my previous videos. Pull it out really quick. It's this guy. And there's another one too, like General Hydroponics makes one. This is Bloom City. But yeah, so that can actually have an impact on flavor. So if you're noticing that your cherry tomatoes might not have that flavor that you're looking for, adding those, or if they're not growing well, adding nutrients like CalMag can really make a difference. Now, I haven't noticed a huge difference myself before and after using CalMag, but I will say when I first started, when I wasn't using any extra nutrients, the cherry tomatoes did have a lackluster flavor, but I also was growing mini Siams, and I find that the red robins, which is what 3 of the 4 of these are, and that's this one too, they just have a better flavor to me. So they're not as like mealy, I guess, that I can find that with mini Siams can get a little mealy and mushy. The red robins are a little bit more tart. They're not that sweet, just so you know. And they have a bit more of a bite to them, and more of like when you bite in, they kind of pop, you know? So I really like the red robin. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys this bottom level next. Let me talk about it first while you're set up over here. And then I'll turn the camera around so you can see. Okay, so I have a jalapeno started. They get huge, so I'm hoping by the time that jalapeno gets bigger, I'll have this Dora tomato out, but it still has a long way to go to get ripened. So I have a Dora tomato in here, which is similar to a cherry tomato. It's just taller, has a lot more fruit on, and we are going to do a taste test in just a second before I turn you guys around. I've never tried these before, so I'm very excited to see what these taste like. So you and I will be trying them together. And then I have 2 more big slicer tomatoes in here. So you might be thinking, isn't this too small to grow a slicer? So like a big chunky tomato? Not if you get a determinate variety, which means it stops at a certain height of growth. And not if you get one that's labeled. They have ones that are, I don't really call them dwarfs, but I've called it, I will Google like dwarf Roma or dwarf slicer tomatoes, and they do come up, have ones that are shorter varieties. So I have 2 varieties in here. I'll put them up on the screen because I can never remember the names of them off the top of my head, and I don't have my seeds out right now. One of them is from Baker Creek. I think it's a Thornburn. I believe that's what I germinated. This was for a while ago I germinated this. And the other one I want to say is a Summer Pick Hybrid. It's from Tully Tomatoes. So I will put those on the screen, and that will correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so the one I was actually planning to put in a pot of soil. Well, I didn't mention this in any of my other videos. I actually brought my rosemary from inside, and my rosemary was covered in leafhopper insects, which is a pest that can actually get pretty bad. So they jumped onto my plants. I had leafhoppers everywhere. I got sticky traps. I hand smushed them. They're like a mini grasshopper, so they're really hard to catch. And I got rid of them all, thank gosh. But that traumatized me to the point where I'm like, I am not going to bring soil or outdoor plants in here. I broke my own rule and I kind of regretted it, but I saved everything, so that's good. So my plan was actually to put the one on the right, which I believe is the Summer Pick Hybrid, which gets a little bigger. My goal was to put that one in the soil. Well, I put the soil back outside, and now what I'm doing, and I'll show you in a minute, is I'm trying to grow the tomato off to the side and up. There's enough space for the roots, mostly. I have one too many plants down here, so. Okay, are you guys ready for a taste test? So like I said, I have never tried this tomato before. Okay, so I'm very excited. I hope I'm not disappointed. And I would like to point out, if I don't react very positively, it's probably because this, here it is, by the way. Aren't they cute? It's called a Dora is it Heartbreaker or Heartstopper? Heartbreaker? Heartbreaker. There's a red variety too, which I actually bought a pack of, but I only have the orange in there. Super cute. This tomato has really been through it all. Before when it's been in here since I've had those nutrient issues, just like this guy. Actually, it was in there before that. And it only started taking off since I started adding these other nutrients. So if it doesn't have the best flavor, I'm not going to give up on it quite yet. All right, here we go. It's good. It'll be great in salads. It doesn't have as much of a bite as that Red Robin. Try the Red Robin again. Like the Red Robin has that pop, you know, like when you eat a tomato and it just, the skin pops and then you get that like flood of juice, right? The flavors are different, quite a bit actually. So it's good. I like it. I can't wait to cut it open and try it. And I think it'll be good cut in half and put in salads. It had a slightly more mealy flavor to it. So that's kind of what I was tasting when I was, that's the first time I've eaten those guys. So genuine reaction. Good. It's not one where I'm like, ew, I don't want to grow that again. But it definitely doesn't have, it has like almost no sweetness to it. It's just kind of more mild, slightly more mealy than like the Red Robin. And it doesn't have that pop necessarily. That one might have been a little overripened though. Let's try, I don't want to try one more because I want these for myself. Let's do one more. We'll do one more. Okay. This one's a little tougher. The other one I had was definitely, this one has a little more green on it, actually. So let's give this one a try. I'll bite it in half and I'll show you guys what it looks like. It's good. It has an interesting flavor. I'm not quite sure how to put it. Here's the only way I can describe it. It almost tastes like the tomato leaf smell. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's because I'm smelling tomato leaves on my hands, but. Definitely a little more mealy. It's still good. So I'm excited to try it again, especially since this poor plant's been in here forever. Okay. So now that we have our taste test out of the way, I'm really excited to show you guys the other 2 tomatoes. I'm very worried that they're going to grow into the lights, but I've been trimming them, so we'll see. But they have some flowers on them, which is really neat. The flowers are really pretty. All right, so here we go. All right, so here's the jalapeno. It's actually looking fantastic. Very healthy plant. There's not much room for it to grow. I mean, it's got this space, but usually this jalapeno takes over at least the equivalent of 1 tray in width. And you can see my other tomato is really covering over that. All right, so here's the one we just taste tested. Give you guys like a close-up of what it looks like, the Dora. There's even more growing way back there, so I'm hoping that these will ripen before my jalapeno so that I can kind of chop this off and then just have like a very thin, narrow plant. But anyway, there's the Dora. And yeah, the leaves look crazy. That's kind of how this plant grows. It could also be that maybe it just doesn't take well to hydroponics, but it's really been fun to grow. I love the shape of it. Okay, so over here are my other 2, the jungle, which is the jungle of the cucumbers and the jungle of tomatoes. So I'm pretty sure that this is the Thornburn. I think I'm saying that right, the Baker Creek one. But look at these beautiful tomato flowers. Oops, hold on. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? Having a hard time focusing on just the flower. There we go. And then the other one also has, oh, it had a flower, but it actually closed up. Right there. And there's one over there. Let's see. It's hard to get in there because it's such a jungle, like I said. Yeah, they're closing up because I've pollinated them a lot. So hopefully we'll get a tomato out of that one. Okay, so you can kind of see that this is getting a little close to the lights. You can actually trim these determinate tomatoes. So what I've been doing is like, once I have the equivalent of a sucker, which is a plant growing out of this center area, in indeterminate tomatoes, you'll pull those out, but I want them because I want to pull this off. And then this one will grow, and then I'm not getting into the lights. Also, when you start trimming above, you'll get more growth down below. So I'm just hoping it kind of gets a little bushier so that it'll actually fit in here. But again, I'll show you guys a picture of what this is supposed to look like, but I'm very excited about the flowers here. So worst case, I could cut this off and I would still have a harvest here, which is not going to get close to the light, so that'll work. Okay, so this one over here, definitely a thicker, bigger tomato. It's pretty big, actually. In fact, I'll show you guys what it looks like under here. It's like absolute chaos, although it's actually not too bad. There's actually some open space back there. So the roots are not too bad. I'm actually kind of surprised. I looked recently and thought it would be worse by now, but it's not. So this, like I said, is that I believe it's the summer pick hybrid. I didn't label them, and I usually do, and then I got lost, and I'm not sure which is which. But we got some nice blooms up in here. We have a lot, actually. So worst case, like I said, I mean, there's more up here, too. So worst case, I can trim it, but I actually, show you guys what I did. I actually pulled a panel, it's down there. I pulled a panel out of my trellis, and I I tied a string to pull the main stem of the tomato out of the garden. And my hope is, if I step back, you can kind of see, my hope is to kind of have it go up the side so that I have like actual real estate in here. And if this works, I'm going to keep this because I really like this. But I think that's all I'm going to say about those guys for now. So one last peek. We'll do one last look at the gardens. Really love it when they're this full. It looks so great. I love the green. All right, next we're going to move on to the sprout garden. So right next to it, obviously. All right, so I'm not going to spend much time in this garden. Here's my cilantro. And I believe it's Calypso. It's just been so sad. I actually switched nutrients, which I'll tell you guys about in a second when I switch the camera back. And since then, it's actually been doing better. But this coloring like this, like it shouldn't be changing color like that. It should be like literally 3 times this size. So I've been struggling with cilantro lately. I don't know why. I think it's the nutrients I was using. Again, here's my spinach. It's the only one that didn't bolt. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think it was a nutrient issue. Plus my spinach seeds are kind of old, but I think again it was nutrients. Here are my Muscat green beans, doing fantastic. There's 2 here. I think there's 5. 2 here, 1 back there, that guy. Yep, and then there's 1 here, and then this ginormous beast. Look at this thing. This is one Muscat. I don't know what is going on, but I love it. And then I have in another video, my last garden tour, I actually harvested some of my green beans. Maybe I'll set you guys down, or maybe if I can pull it off, let's see. Actually have clippers for this. Oh, there we go, it came off. Okay. This is about when I harvest them. You can kind of start seeing like the actual bumps from the seeds forming. You could maybe go a couple more days. Actually, you can see the seeds inside. This is about the size I like them. I don't like them to get too big and thick because then they get really mealy. But I have a lot in here, and this plant is just going and going. I actually have it tied down. You can see the string. I have it tied down to pull it down from the lights because it's just so big. But yeah, I've gotten a lot out of it. It's been super prolific. I love this green bean. Okay, next one. And again, if you want to watch my other garden tour video, I talk a lot more about the beans there. Okay, here is my bronze arrowhead lettuce, and this is a Paris Island Cost. So you have another cilantro in there because I'm just not pleased. I'm going to fill this in with a cucumber and 2 more lettuces soon. But yeah, so these are my 2 baby lettuces. They're both, this is a romaine. This one is kind of like a butter lettuce, but it has just the best flavor. Love these 2 lettuces. I'll show you guys my other video on that one soon. Okay, sit down. All right, so here's the cauliflower. So again, I was having more nutrient issues in this garden, so these guys got a bit stunted, but I'm actually kind of happy with the size. That guy's a good size back there. Green onions, and then 2 more cauliflower. So let's check these ones. I know this one has a head in it, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you can eat cauliflower greens. These, I just haven't found a way to cook them that I like yet, which is partly why I bought that composter, so I feel like I'm not wasting too much. There should be a head forming in there eventually. There might already be one, but I don't want to pull it apart. None in there. Okay, so I have one here, and I want to talk to you guys about why I tied it like this, because you'll notice that, there it is. Isn't it cute? Look, it's actually pretty big for the size of this little plant. These will get to be about the size of a softball or a little bit bigger. So it's not, you're not getting a ton of food off of these. I've also grown broccoli, which works really well. Okay, so let's talk about why it's tied. So if you look closely, it's shaded right now. So the light intensity from these lights is almost too much, in my opinion, for growing brassicas. Sometimes they'll actually not bolt fast, but they'll spread apart. So the head of the cauliflower, all of those those are all going to be individual flowers, and they'll actually pull apart, and you'll get gaps in the head of the cauliflower. I don't want to untie this, guys, because this took forever to position this leaf. But the reason it's shaded is because the light from above, my grow lights up here, having 16 hours, or I do 15, having 15 hours of light on the plants will actually not only make the head of the cauliflower break open, and you'll get gaps, it'll also turn it green, and it'll actually start to produce chlorophyll, which is what the green color is from in a plant. So that happened the last time I did this, and then I saw this trick about people actually using rubber bands or ties, and they'll cover their cauliflower outside like this. I'm like, let's give that a try and see if that helps with the indoor cauliflower. So that's where we're at right there. Super cool. All right, I think that's it for the garden tour. I'm just going to turn you guys around, and I want to say one quick thing about this garden and one of the changes I made to it, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so just to kind of wrap it up, I did want to talk to you guys about something I did differently in the garden I just showed you. So the one with the cauliflower and the beans. So this garden over here, I'm still using my Rise Blossom nutrients, and I'm using my Flower Fuel and the CalMag I showed you with the red bottle, the calcium magnesium supplement. And things are looking great, right? So I'm going to stick with that. I think that combo is working really well. The other garden, I've been having some issues with the Rise version of the sprout nutrients, even though I was putting some CalMag in that garden too. What would happen is stuff would grow pretty well for like 2 weeks and then just stop. And not only would it just stop, I was having plants bolt. So all my spinach, I did a spinach video, and I was going to actually do a follow-up on my spinach. It actually might be my last garden video, my garden tour. All my spinach bolted. Before the leaves they were about that size, that little one I just showed you, and they were all bolting. And I was like, what is happening? So I was still having some problems with the garden. So I decided to switch to Maxi Grow, General Hydroponics. Heard some good stuff about the nutrients. I also have the Bloom version, but I'm going to use my other ones so far because I'm liking how those are working. So one of the main things I really like about Maxi Grow and the General Hydroponics brand, they also have a Flora series, which is liquid. So if you don't want to do dry, you can do liquid as well. But I like how it actually tells you, sorry, it's backwards, I believe, guys. I like how they actually tell you the nitrogen, the NPK. So the amount of nitrogen to phosphorus to calcium, or to potassium. NPK. I always have to think about it because I always want to say P is potassium, but it's phosphorus. So I like how they actually say that. So that's helpful. As much as I do really like the Rise ones, I don't actually know the concentration of the NPK. It doesn't say. So that's been kind of a challenge. And I have, like I said, been having issues in this garden, not only with the plants just stopping growing. The only one that didn't stop was the beans. And the lettuce did well for those like 3 weeks and everything just stopped. But yeah, so I'm happy to switch this, but I'm also still having pH issues in that garden using the Rise nutrients, but not in this one. So maybe there's something with the sprout. I'm not sure. But either way, that's where we're at. So all right, guys, so I hope that you enjoyed that garden tour. The gardens are looking fantastic. I'm going to post actually after this video, or maybe it came out before. I'm not 100% sure what order I want to do it in yet. I'm going to show you guys the lettuce video I made because the lettuce was amazing. I had 5 heads on that row, and it just looked so great. It was so full and beautiful, and the lettuce tastes great. I love it. Hydroponic lettuce. If for nothing else, if you're even thinking about getting a hydroponic garden, even if it's smaller than this, just grow some lettuce because it tastes so much better than the grocery store. But yeah, so all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this tour. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel and stay tuned every month. My goal is to do 1 garden tour a month. Hopefully I can maintain that, but I think it'd be neat to show you guys the progress and how the gardens are changing every month. All right, everybody. See you later.